That's it's a big system. Yeah. So let's do it. Yeah. All right. First of all, how many hearts you got? That's right. You got 2 hearts. Beating is 1. Is this one? Okay. So you got 2 hearts. You have the right heart, and then you have the left heart. Now this is important, all right? So the left side of the heart, and primarily the left ventricle, pumps oxygen-rich blood, O2-rich blood, to the cells of the body. What's the heart made out of? Muscle. And muscle can do 2 things. It can contract and relax. Say yeah. So in this, when we talk about the left heart, and specifically the left ventricle, when the left ventricle contracts and pushes oxygenated blood down to the cells of the body, there's a pressure there. And that pressure that's generated by the left ventricle contracting, and it's measured in the brachial artery, is called what? What part of your blood pressure? Yeah, that's your systolic blood pressure. Right? So systolic blood pressure is always measured in typically the brachial artery. Now, when the left ventricle relaxes, is there any pressure in the left ventricle when it relaxes? How much of a bit? What do you got there? Okay. Is there? How much? Yeah. So watch. Your systolic blood pressure, normal, is 120 millimeters of mercury. You can't see that, huh? Can you see that? Is this a pen or a highlighter? That's why it's doing that. 120 millimeters of mercury. That's when the left ventricle contracts. That's your systolic blood pressure. Your diastolic blood pressure is when the left ventricle relaxes. And there's still pressure in the arterial system even when the left ventricle is relaxed. So that's where you get the numbers of 120 over 80. And it's always written systolic over diastolic blood pressure. And again, it is measured in systemic arteries. Say yeah. See, that wasn't so bad, was it? Okay. Look, just like anything else, just like any, is that the highlighter? No, okay. Watch. The goal of the body is to maintain homeostasis. The goal of the cardiovascular system is to maintain what? It's to maintain blood flow. And anything that flows is, in medicine, is abbreviated as Q. So, and we learn this, write this down, never forget it, that in the average adult pumps about 5 liters of blood each minute. Do we do it all at once? Do we pump 5 liters of blood all at once? Right. If we did, we would have to have a left ventricle that was like this big. And I just went, and be like, you got me? So we do it a little bit over that entire minute. So when you feel someone's pulse, what you're actually measuring is the number of times the left ventricle contracts. So that's your heart rate. It's kind of annoying, that thing going back and forth, ain't it? Hang on. Let me see if I can find that other thing. Hang on. I just had it up. Oh, that ain't right. Where is it? Oh, here. You see that thing? Oh, there it is. Okay. Hang on, I apologize. How do you get out of here? Okay. Now, watch. And this is important. There is a concept called MAP. MAP stands for mean arterial pressure. And mean arterial pressure is really what's referred to as your perfusion pressure. It is the pressure that's needed to be produced by the heart in order to sustain life. And in the textbook medical definition of shock, if you see an accident and somebody's sitting on the curb and they're bleeding their own blood and they're going, oh, I wish I would have read the textbook. Are they in shock? Yeah. Are they in the textbook definition of shock? No. Yeah. Yes or no? Are they in the textbook definition of shock? You need to write this down. Okay? Shock, by definition, shock is the inability of the cardiovascular system to maintain blood flow to your brain and vital organs. If you don't maintain blood flow to your brain, are you going to be conscious? No. So in the textbook definition of shock, if someone's in shock, they are unconscious. Tell me you got that. So if they're sitting on the side of the curb going, oh, I should have read the textbook or drank some Crystal Light. You got me? Are they in shock? They could be going into shock. They could be what's referred to as shock E, but they're not in the textbook definition of shock. And you better write this down, better not pout. The textbook definition of shock is when the mean arterial blood pressure is less than or equal to 60 millimeters of mercury. That's the textbook definition of shock. And this is important, and I want this. How you determine mean arterial blood pressure is you do it this way. It is 2 times your diastolic blood pressure plus your systolic blood pressure divided by 3. Now, if you recall from the orders of operation in your math class, you always do your parentheses first. Ain't that right? So let's give, let me give you a number. 80 over 30. So the systolic blood pressure is 80. The diastolic blood pressure is 30. Is this person in shock? So you take 2 times the diastolic, which is 30, plus systolic, which is 80, and divide it by 3. So that would be 2 times 30 is 60, plus 80 is 140, divided by 3. So is this person in shock? Is their mean arterial blood pressure less than 60? Yep. So that's the textbook definition of shock. And in clinical, you're going to learn the different types of shock. And I'm not going to go into that, but there's several different types. Tell me you followed that. Okay. If you get this right, and Latoya, I'm going to pick on you. Why? I don't know. Why not? You're so close, right? Plus, I'm sick. My arm hurt just doing that. All right, watch. What are arteries and veins mostly made out of? Thanks, Toya. What are arteries and veins mostly made out of? Say it. Muscle. Better write this down, better not pout. Now explain. Now it's going to come back, and it's going to rear its ugly head again. Remember when I talked to you about leak channels and voltage-gated channels? In the heart, this is where it's going to come back and bite you in the rump roast. You got me? The heart and blood vessels, arteries and veins, are mostly made of muscle. Blood vessels are made of smooth muscle. What that means is that their rate of contraction and relaxation is very, very slow. They are slow to contract, and they are also slow to relax. If your arteries were made of cardiac muscle or skeletal muscle, your arteries would be going like this all day, boom, getting bigger, smaller. So you'd be up and down again, up, down again. You follow? So smooth muscle in the arteries and veins, watch, and because they're made of muscle, and what's the hole that blood flows through in an artery called? Please get this right. Nice. So this part right here is made of muscle. And when that muscle contracts, what happens to the size of the lumen? It gets what? Smaller. What's it called when you had an artery that had a big diameter and then it got small? What's it called? It's called vessel constriction. You got me? And then if an artery was little and it got big, what's that called? That's called vasodilation. Write this down, never forget it. If I could, maybe I will. I'll put this up here, not to erase. Calcium is the most important element in muscular contraction. Without calcium, muscles will not contract. Now this is important. Watch. Please get this. The heart and blood vessels rely almost exclusively on calcium from the blood to contract. Almost exclusively. Are you with me so far? You following this? Yeah? Okay, so watch. What's the goal of the cardiovascular system? Come on. To maintain blood flow. Maintain Q. Ain't that right? Okay. I'll tell you, when somebody taught me this, my whole world opened up. I actually measured my height before I learned this and after, and I actually grew 2 inches as a result of learning this. That's no joke. Yeah. Watch. If you look at this picture, other than the fact that it says it, if you look here, this is an artery and this is a vein. If you look at how thin the muscular wall of the vein is compared to the muscular wall of the artery. The muscular wall of the artery is much thicker. Why? Because systemic arteries, better write this down, systemic arteries, arteries that supply the cells of your body, are, as we just described, under pressure. So again, the body does stuff that makes sense. So vessels that have more pressure have to have a thicker muscular wall to withstand that pressure. Oh, yeah? All right. So do you have any superficial arteries? Are there any arteries in your body that come to the surface at some point? Yeah, right. You got your radial artery. You got me? Axillary, right? Carotid. You got me? Those are pressure points. So watch. If somebody gets their arm chopped off, right, and they're bleeding their own blood, are you going to take your hand and try to cover up all those little arteries? Are you going to do that? What you do is you find their pressure point, axilla, compress it, and that will stop the bleeding. Those are the pressure points. So if somebody's leg is bleeding, femoral artery, you'd push. Say, yeah. Now, this is really important. If somebody's bleeding on their scalp, then you usually apply a tourniquet around their neck. That will stop the bleeding.
Really tight?
Yeah. That's why I like common sense. If you have common sense, you'll be a good nurse. And women, for whatever reason, I really believe this, that they have a sense of when things are going bad. Do you know what I'm saying? Like, they can sense these things. I don't think men have that ability. I think that women do. Like, watch. I believe a woman knows if her man is cheating on them. Even if she has no, like, physical evidence or anything like that, I believe that a woman just knows that. I believe that. So, having said that, it also works in nursing, too, where women, you know, they just have the sense that something ain't right. Now, watch. And listen up, because this is, if you learn anything, learn this. A doctor will never remember you waking them up at 2:30 in the morning for something that was not that important. Are you following me? But they will always remember when you should have woke them up and you didn't. You got me? So if you think that something ain't right, your job is to report it. Say yes. All right, so watch. This is important here. Where does the heart and blood vessels get its calcium from to contract? Was that the, did I ask the right question right there? Okay, good. From the blood. Are you with me? How many people are following this? So if you look, who's looking? Anybody? Can I also tell you? I'm kind of a prick when I'm sick. Like, I don't have any patience when I'm sick. Like, I have less patience. I don't even forget it. Listen to me. Listen to me. There's calcium floating in the blood. Here's the muscular wall of the artery. Can calcium from the blood just willy-nilly go into the muscular wall of that artery and cause that artery to contract? No. It has to go, watch it, you're not going to believe this, through a specific calcium ion channel embedded in the muscular wall of those arteries. Do you see this? Do you see this? And when it does that, it's going to cause that artery that was once this big to now constrict. Say yes. Totally got that. Guys? It's huge. All right. So write this down. Systemic arteries. Arteries that supply oxygenated blood to the cells of the body. Are referred to as the resistance vessels. Say yeah. All right, and this idea you've got to get. You got to get. All right? If you were an artery, is anybody an artery in this class? No? Okay. If you were blood and you had a flow through an artery that had this diameter or an artery that had this diameter, which artery would you rather flow through? A or 2? A. Why? Because an artery with a bigger diameter has less, better write this down, has less resistance to blood flow. An artery that has a smaller diameter has more resistance to blood flow. And where does arterial blood, people, money always take? There you go. Are you ready? All right. Now watch. Some of you have heard this before, but we're going to put it out there a little bit more. Now watch. There's a law that governs blood flow. Rebecca, what is it? That's right. It's Ohm's flow law. And because it's a law and not a bill, it has to be followed. Are you following me? Watch. So blood flow, when you relate Ohm's flow law, Q, is equal to your systolic blood pressure And write this down. Your systolic blood pressure is primarily determined by the force of contraction of your left ventricle. You got me? Divided by the resistance to arterial blood flow. Are you with me? Bless you. This is really huge. And what ultimately determines the resistance to blood flow is the diameter of the systemic arteries. Are you following me so far? You getting this, guys? All right. So watch. Here's your little left ventricle. What happened? How come my little left ventricle ain't working? This sucks. Okay, ready? Now watch. Two sides to your heart, right? Right side, left side. The left side of the heart pumps oxygenated blood down to the cells of the body through systemic arteries. Yes? Okay. And because it's a muscle, it will contract. It will squeeze. You got me? And it will squeeze that blood out of the left heart into the aorta and then down to the cells of the body. Yeah? How many people are following me so far? All right. So watch. If you have arteries, yeah? And if you relate this to Ohm's flow law, right, where you have to pump out 5 liters of blood, and that's equivalent to your systolic blood pressure divided by the resistance to blood flow. You got me? And what's the primary determinant of resistance to blood flow? What determines it? The diameter of the arteries. So let's say, for example, that the average diameter of your arteries were like this, and then something causes all of your arteries throughout your body to constrict. Are you with me? What's going to happen to resistance to arterial blood flow? Is it going to go up or down? It's going to go up. So if resistance to blood flow goes up because the arteries got smaller, you have to maintain Q. So what has to happen to your systolic blood pressure? It has to go up. Tell me you got that. Guys? How many people are following this? Yes or no? Got it? Okay, that's good. So I'm just going to tell you this. I'll go over a little more detail. So the left ventricle, that's the primary pump. The left ventricle develops pressure. And the arteries, the systemic arteries, are the resistance vessels. And the resistance to arterial blood flow is determined primarily by the diameter of all of those arteries throughout your body. Yeah? Okay. So watch. Troy, what did you want to be when you grew up? Oh, you wanted for real? Didn't you want to be like a ballerina or maybe a fry cook?
Yeah, that's it.
Okay. All right, so watch. For me, I wanted to be a fry cook. So did I still, when I was 20, have to pump 5 liters of blood per minute? Did I? Yep. So I went to the doctor, and the doctor took my systolic blood pressure, and he said, Timmy, it's 120 millimeters of mercury. And he said, that's good for you. And I said, thank you. And then I left. Didn't even pay a copay or nothing. You following? All right. So if you apply this to Ohm's flow law, systolic blood pressure 120, what was my resistance to blood flow? What? It was 24, because 24 into 120 is 5 in literally any language. So watch. That meant that the average size of my arteries throughout my body were this big. I'm making this up. You follow? Well, I'm 54 now. Life didn't turn out the way I wanted. It would have. I'd have been retired by now. So here we go. I'm now 54. Do I still have to pump 5 liters of blood per minute? Yep, you got to maintain Q, right? But now I go to the doctor, and the doctor says, Timmy, your systolic blood pressure is 240 millimeters of mercury. And I am shocked. I even say, oh, I actually say that. What has happened? Ugh, shouldn't talk where you're drinking. Over the past 34 years, what has happened to the average size of my arteries throughout my body? What has happened to the diameter? They have gotten smaller. Tell me you got that. So if you look here, the resistance has doubled because the arteries got smaller. Say yeah, guys. All right. So my doctor says, Timmy, that's bad for you. And I say, okay. He said, I'm going to give you a medicine that lowers your blood pressure. You got me? And it's going to lower your blood pressure. What's the most important element in muscular contraction? Where do the arteries and heart get their calcium from to contract? Can calcium simply willy-nilly go from the blood into the muscular wall? It has to go through a specific calcium ion channel. So if you take a drug that blocks calcium ion channels in the muscular wall of your artery, will the artery contract or relax? And if it relaxes, the diameter gets bigger. So what happens to resistance to arterial blood flow in this case? Goes what? It goes down. And if resistance to blood flow goes down, hang on. Where is it? Where did I put it? Where is that picture? Where was it? I was doing good. Where is it? Was it here? No. Oh, I just blew that one. Oh, wait. Here we go. No, that ain't it. Where did I put it? Well, you got it, right? Guys? Do you know what where I'm trying to lead you? Okay. So watch. I still have to pump 5 liters of blood per minute. My systolic blood pressure was 240 millimeters of mercury. That meant the average size of my arteries, right? The resistance to arterial blood flow was 48. That means that the average diameter of my arteries was like this. Yeah? Then my doctor gives me a medicine that prevents calcium from getting into the muscular wall of the artery. I still have to pump 5 liters of blood per minute. But now my arteries, instead of being this small, they are bigger. So my resistance to blood flow has gone down because the arteries got bigger. So in order to maintain Q, what has to happen to your systolic blood pressure? It has to go down. So I answered 2 questions here. I answered Ohm's flow law. You got me? Which, by the way, is worth 150 points. Yes. And I also answered one of 3 ways, 3 medications used to control blood pressure. And they're called calcium channel blockers. So this is critical. Doctors control blood pressure by controlling the diameter of arteries. If your blood pressure is low, they will give you something that will cause the arteries to constrict. If your blood pressure is high, they will give you something that causes your arteries to dilate. So by controlling the diameter of arteries, that's how physicians control blood pressure. And one of the ways they do that is by blocking calcium channels in systemic arteries. So one of the drugs is a calcium channel. Have you ever heard of these drugs? You ever heard of Norvasc? Have you heard of that? How about Cardizem? You ever hear of that? Procardia? Have you ever heard of that? How about Verapamil? Have you ever heard of that? Have you? Those are all calcium channel blockers. And what do? They block calcium channels. That's how they work. There you go. Okay. And this is really important. I'm going to write that down. They work primarily, physicians do this, they control blood pressure by controlling the diameter of arteries. Will you indulge me just a little bit? Okay. Um, can I show you this video real quick? I explained this to you. I just explained calcium channel blockers to you, right? So this guy is going to explain it to you now. Just listen. That's very loud. This is simply retardednursing.com. It's 12 minutes. You can indulge me. I write that down when he talks. It's actually peen. He don't even say them right either. I can't pick on him. I can't talk either. So this guy, right? This guy does these things, and watch. Watch. Yeah, I know. Right. I can't believe it. Genius, just genius. Thank you. So that tells you the level of education
Perfect explanation. Thanks for posting.
that these people are getting. And I always worried about it. I thought, gee whiz, am I doing the right thing? Am I giving you a good education? They wrote back to me. How do you know they wrote back to me? Oh, he's making stuff up. That he's making stuff up.
Source it on YouTube. Explain Jennifer to really lower blood pressure. He sends the link and everything.
Here's the thing, look, I got no problem with somebody getting out there and trying to present information, all right? I get that, all right? But it's one thing when you charge people money for this. He's charging these people $40 a month, nursing students $40 a month to join the, and it's awful. It's awful. The day I make a video where I have to read stuff off a card, have you ever seen me read anything and then write it down? No.
What was the 2 replies on that one? To you.
What replies?
Right there.
There ain't no reply, is there?
Replies to- oh.
It just has 2 likes.
2 likes, okay. Okay, I wasn't, okay.
But people think that's wonderful.
I think so too.
I don't care. Who cares?
I was
Literally
trying to
makes no
see through
sense.
the heart
I've
on the
seen,
paper.
But you know, here's the thing though. You get 1,000 people to buy into your garbage, and that's $40 a month. That's $450,000 a year.
Those kids who go to school.
So he should be liable if they kill somebody. If it was his fault.
Why?
Because he's an idiot. He's putting out bad information, false information.
If when we get to beta blockers, I'm going to explain how those work.
They should know better.
No, no, they don't. I'm telling you that they don't. I'm telling you that they don't.
Just Google stuff like that, and then they're like, oh, this guy's so smart. Yeah, this makes sense. What is my teacher trying to tell me?
Oh, and I always love it too. They're like, I wish my nursing instructors would explain it like this. What a bunch of idiots. Well, you don't work hard though. No. Okay, how many people filed that little calcium channel blocker thing? Did you file that? So remember, the physicians control blood pressure primarily by controlling the diameter of arteries. Say yeah. And you better get this. I'm not even going to write it. I'm just going to say it. That when arterial diameter gets bigger, what happens to resistance to blood flow? Goes down. And in order to maintain Q, what has to happen to systolic blood pressure? It has to go down. So that's how they control blood pressure, by controlling the diameter of arteries. Say yes. All right? Okay, that's good. All right. Okay, watch. Forget it. Okay, if you get this, I'm going to be really proud of you, and I'll give you extra credit. 1,000,000 points. Yeah, good. Yeah, 1,000,000. All right, so watch.
Your heart is a pump.
Now, watch. When the left ventricle contracts and ejects that arterial blood down to the cells of the body, yes, it has a certain pressure, correct? And what's that pressure? Exerted against the arterial walls that you measure with a stethoscope and a blood pressure cuff. What's that pressure called? It's called your systolic blood pressure. Say yeah. Okay. So please get this. what happens to the pressure inside the arteries as you move farther and farther away from the heart and closer to the cell? The pressure goes. So if let's just say that was true, it did go up. So you got 120 here, and then when you get down to the capillary, which by the way are one cell membrane thick, it goes up to 300. Can a single cell capillary withstand a pressure of 300? What's the thickest artery you have in your body? The aorta, because it has to withstand the greatest pressure, form and function. So as the blood leaves the left ventricle, as the blood gets contracted out of the left ventricle and moves through the large arteries and the smaller arteries and the arterioles down to the capillary, the pressure begins to drop, and it drops dramatically. Very important. So better write this down, better not pout. That the pressure, and I guess you could say, right, you could say systolic blood pressure in the capillaries. In the arterial end of the capillary, I'll show you, is about 15 to 20 millimeters of mercury. So it's relatively low. This relatively low pressure, watch. How thick are capillaries and cell membrane? One cell membrane thick, right? So this pressure, so here you got your cell in the interstitial space, and this pressure of 5 or like 10 to 15 millimeters of mercury in the arterial end of the capillary. This is important. So it's 10 to 15 millimeters of mercury. It's going to cause some of that fluid from the arterial end of the capillary to get pushed into the interstitial space. You got me? But what does our body have that can drain that excess fluid? It has the lymphatic system, right? That's why you don't have big swollen hands and feet. So by the time the gases are exchanged, right, oxygen goes into the cell and carbon dioxide leaves the cell and goes into the blood, that venous blood, right, has no pressure. You got me? Write that down. Never forget it. There's no pressure in the venous system. No pressure in the venous system. I'm going to get a bumper sticker that says that and sell it to each of you for $29.95. You got me? So venous blood has no pressure. So if there's no pressure in the venous system, say yes. Guys? How does that venous blood get back to your heart, the right side of your heart? And? Better write this down, better not pout. I was teaching a pathophysiology class last semester, did I tell you, in the summer? And I was explaining, because I was going to explain congestive heart failure to students. And a student in fourth semester, she was going to graduate. She was going to graduate. And she goes, there's no pressure in the veins? And veins have one-way valves? Oh, did you really? No such luck this semester, just so you know. Veins have one-way valves that only open up towards the heart. Write this down. Veins are the capacitance vessels. Veins can store extra blood. And the largest repository of that extra venous blood are in the veins of your legs. So the veins of your legs store a bunch of extra blood. You got me? And your largest veins of the body that store that extra blood are deep inside muscle. So what do? Especially when class is over, you don't walk, you run out of here. I get it, right? So here's your vein. There's no pressure in your vein. Also, I decided that when you're taking the quiz, I'm going to walk past you and go like this. Where are the largest veins of your body? Deep inside muscle. So when you walk, you will contract your muscle and you will squish those veins. And when you squish those veins, you force open those one-way valves. And it is the contraction and relaxation of skeletal muscle in those one-way valves that will allow that venous blood to get back to your heart. Say yes. Tell me you got that. Tell me you knew that. Yes? Okay. All right. So watch. Anybody ever have abdominal surgery? Anybody here? I don't know. Yeah, I guess it does.
Okay, then I had it.
Oh, you had it? Okay. It's called SCDs. Do you know what SCDs are? Sexually transmitted disease. SCDs are sequential compression devices. You've heard of these? So when people have abdominal surgery, they don't want to get up and move. And there's no pressure in the veins. Where did it? I don't even have that written. Can't believe that. There's no pressure in the venous system. Where do you store a lot of extra blood? So when you're laying in bed, you're not going to want to get up and move. So these compression devices compress your muscle and squish the veins, and then they deflate to mimic you moving. Say yes. Because is arterial blood always under pressure? Yes, unless you're dead, then your heart has stopped. But is venous blood under pressure? No, not always. So blood that doesn't move, venous blood that doesn't move, don't move. Whoops. Does what? What does blood that don't move do? It clots. This is so fundamental. That you just really need to get this idea. You just do. Hang on. Hang on. All right, so watch. Venous blood that doesn't move has a tendency to clot. The largest veins of your body are deep inside muscle. So when you move around, it's going to force open those one-way valves, and it's going to send that venous blood back to your heart, that deoxygenated blood. But if you sit around on your fatty acid for a long period of time and you're not getting up and moving around, then blood will settle. It will pool, especially in your legs, right? Most of the time during the day, you're moving your arms. You don't see too many people do this, where they don't move their arms at all. So clots in your veins of your arms, they're not likely. But because people sit down and they tend not to move their legs, clots can form there. In this case, the clot appears to be a marshmallow treat with certs in it. Now, if the clot stays there, this is called a deep vein thrombosis. But if you get up and you start contracting your muscles, you can dislodge that clot, and a clot that moves is called an embolus. So watch. What happens to the diameter of the veins as they get closer and closer to the heart? They get bigger. So when that clot dislodges, is that clot going to block any of the veins on the way back to the right side of the heart? No. There it goes. I don't know if you know this, but when somebody develops a pulmonary embolus or a deep vein thrombosis that begins to travel, you will know it because it will actually begin to light up. And then you look and it's like, oh, see ya, buddy, and it's over. So that clot that is now dislodged is not going to block any of the veins on the way back to the right side of the heart. This is why knowing circulation of blood through the heart is not important at all. But if you look, when that venous blood so you got your little clot, right? And it's moving here. It's not going to block any of the veins, right atrium, right ventricle. But what happens to the size of the pulmonary vessels as you get deeper and deeper into the lungs? They get smaller. That's why a deep vein thrombosis will cause a pulmonary embolus. So I ask students who are about to graduate, can a deep vein thrombosis cause a stroke? They're like, oh yeah, Tim. Yep, absolutely. I'm like, okay, good. And that's clear they don't know the circulation of blood through the heart. We're not going to learn that here because that's not important. So a DVT causes a PE, pulmonary embolus. That's why people who have repeated deep vein thrombosis or repeated pulmonary emboli, they will put what's called an umbrella in their inferior vena cava. This little umbrella will catch any blood clots like a little spaghetti strainer so it doesn't block a vessel in the pulmonary circulation.
What's the difference between the tendrils and the
Usually, if people can get up, and with TED hose, it's more for control of edema versus venous return. That's really it, because all you're doing is compressing the vein continually with the TED hose, but with the sequential compression devices, you're actually mimicking the person getting up.
I think it makes it worse.
Those.
Yeah, it like makes some of my people swell worse.
Well, yeah, you know what it does. They may not have any swelling here, but above the TED hose, they have all that swelling. You know, I mean, it's ridiculous.
I never saw any change in that until I went from my last job to this job, and actually, like, the TED hose do the job, and like their legs actually get smaller. I've never seen the legs on here getting smaller until I did this job.
Yeah, well, you know, most of the dependent edema depends on gravity, right? So if we stood on our heads all day and you had heart failure, your head would get swollen. The reason your legs get swollen is because we are upright most days. So yeah, that's why your little crystal light is on the bottom of that bottle by virtue of gravity. So that's what it means by dependent edema. Tell me you followed that. Got that? All right, so that's how that works. I think that's a question, too. Is it a question? What's the question? Okay, here's another thing that just made me absolutely crazy, and that's, just basic things. Just basic things that you should want to know as a nurse. You should want to know them. Is what I'm about to explain next. Okay, let's see. Let's pick a good color. Okay, that's somebody's leg. It looks very nice. Okay. Tell me what type of blood systemic arteries carry. They carry blood that is high in oxygen, low in carbon dioxide, right? And because arteries, unlike veins, don't come to the surface, larger arteries are deep in the core of the body, they can be used as a radiator for the body. So they can dissipate heat or they can hold on to heat. You got me? So arterial blood tends to be warmer than venous blood. Are you following? All right. So watch. If you had an arterial clot in your leg, say you had a femoral clot in the, in the femoral artery. You got me? What would you see in that person's foot? A lump? What's that? Redness, would you? It would be pale, cold, right? Clammy. Would you have a pulse? No pulse. Why would you have no pulse? What system produces a pulse? The arterial system. Say yeah. Are you with me? So if you have a block in an artery, this leg, what appears to be one of those ladies who's got those shoes that kind of curl up and they dance, this leg would be pale, cold, right, clammy, and there would be no pulse because the arterial system, contraction and relaxation of the heart, produces that pulse. Tell me you got that. That's an emergency. If you don't get this, this clot removed, then that leg's going to rot off. You don't want that. You want to live and have a leg that doesn't rot off. So now let's look at if you had a deep vein thrombosis, you had a clot in a vein. Will warm, rich, oxygen-rich blood be able to get down to that foot? Yes. But venous blood would not be able to return to the right heart. So what would happen is that fluid from the capillaries would be pushed into the interstitial space of that foot, and that foot would become swollen. Now, if arterial blood is getting down there, that leg will be red, it will be warm, it will be swollen, right? And they will have a pulse because the arterial blood produces the pulse. Say yeah. You got me. That's the difference between an arterial thrombus and a venous thrombus. Both are bad, but arterial thrombus, if that circulation isn't re-established, whatever part of that body that artery is supplying, it will die. That's how you differentiate between the two. See, how about you got that? And which clot can cause a deep pulmonary embolus? A DVT, because it will detach from the vein, move to the right heart, and then when you go into the pulmonary circulation, the vessels get smaller, so it will block a pulmonary vessel. Stay bold. Yeah? Okay, why don't you take a break? You guys are doing good today. Okay. Marissa, how many sides of the heart you got? Right, you got the right and then middle and the left. Okay. Which side of the heart pumps more blood, the right or the left? What are you saying? No. Which side of the heart pumps more blood, the right or the left? You better write this down, better not pout. The right and left side of the heart pump exactly the same amount of blood. Okay. Exactly the same amount of blood. If they don't, you have a condition called congestive heart failure. Have you heard of congestive heart failure? Good. All right. So watch. This is the important piece. What determines the amount of blood pumped by the right heart? The amount what? So that has a term, right? So I would write this down, tattoo it someplace. The amount of blood pumped by the right heart is determined by the amount of venous blood returned to it. Any pressure in the veins? No. So if you stand up, what happens to venous return to the right side of the heart? It will go down. Tell me you got that. So when we get there, that will help explain a condition called orthostatic hypotension. You got me? All right. So watch. What determines the amount of blood pumped by the right heart? The amount of venous blood returned to it. Yes? What determines the amount of blood pumped by the left heart? I'll give you that. What ultimately determines the amount of blood pumped by the left heart? The amount of blood pumped by the right heart. So because the right heart pumps exactly the same amount of blood that the left heart does, where does the left heart get that blood from? It gets it from the right side. Are you following? So watch. Right. Can I tell you something, though? This is so fundamental, and people don't know this. That's why they don't understand congestive heart failure. You're going to understand congestive heart failure. Marissa, if you don't, you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to mark your whole life wrong. So watch. Watch. When the right heart sends that blood to the lungs to remove carbon dioxide and to take on oxygen, that newly oxygenated blood will then come back to the left heart. You got me? So watch. If the first statement is true and the second statement is true, then the third statement has to be true. You with me? What determines the amount of blood pumped by the right heart? The amount of venous blood that's returned to it. What determines the amount of blood pumped by the left heart? The amount of blood pumped by the right heart. So ipso facto, the amount of blood pumped by the left heart is ultimately determined by the amount of venous blood that is returned to it. Say yes. Totally got that. You're with me. All right. So watch. I'm going to explain the circulation of blood through the heart, and I want it explained exactly like this, because this is exactly how it works. Toya, which side of the heart contracts first, the right or the left?
Right.
Say it.
Left.
No.
Left.
Been tricked. Watch. Both sides of the heart contract at the same time. So watch. You know from general that the right side of the heart has two chambers. It has a right atrium and a right ventricle. What's the valve that separates the right atrium from the right ventricle? What's the valve that separates the right atrium from the right ventricle? The tricuspid valve. You got me? Then you have the left side of the heart. And the left side of the heart contains the left atrium and left ventricle. What's the valve that separates the left atria from the left ventricle? Right, bicuspid valve or mitral valve. You got me? You remember this, right? So here we go. Before I do that, let me say this. The body works on a concentration gradient. Stuff always goes from high to low. High concentration to low, or in this case, high pressure to low pressure. You got me? So here we go. Got to find it. Am I going to do this again? Son of a... High pressure to low, always, always, always high pressure to low. Okay, ready?
Your heart is a pump.
Oh, yeah.
It's
Okay, watch. Ready? It's going to show it in a minute. It's actually a really nice video. Yeah, they're pointing at something. Okay, here we go. This is how the circulation of blood through the heart actually occurs. you learned it as a singular process, right? In fact, in the heart, it works together. And you need to know this. The atria function as a unit. And the ventricles function as a unit. Yes? All right, so here we go. Whole thing. What are the two big vessels that drain all the venous blood from the body into the right atrium? What's this vessel? That's the superior vena cava. So the superior vena cava drains all the venous blood from the upper part of the body into the right atrium. And the inferior vena cava drains all of that venous blood from the lower part of the body. So all venous blood gets dumped into the right atria. Even venous blood from the heart muscle itself gets dumped into the right atria. So all venous blood gets dumped into the right atria. Are you with me? So watch. At the exact same time, O2-rich blood from the lungs, and specifically the pulmonary veins, right? And by definition, you learn this in general. Arteries take blood away from the heart, veins take blood towards the heart. So in the pulmonary circulation, it's opposite. The pulmonary arteries carry venous blood, and the pulmonary veins carry oxygenated blood. Right? You remember that? Yes? Okay. So at the exact same time that venous blood from the body is filling the right atria, oxygenated blood from the pulmonary veins is filling the left atria. You're with me? And when the atria are full of blood, they're under high pressure. Right? And when the atria are full, the ventricles are empty. So as venous blood from the body is filling the right atria and oxygenated blood from the pulmonary veins is filling the left atria, the pressure in the atria is going to increase. And when the pressure is great enough, it is going to force open the tricuspid valve, and the mitral valve. You with me? And this is important. And about 75% of the blood that was in the atria go into the ventricles simply by changes in pressure, high pressure to low. So the filling of the ventricles from the atria to, or the atria to the ventricles is passive. It fills simply by changes in pressure. So look. Boom. This is important. So how much blood gets into the atria or into the ventricles simply by changes in pressure from the atria? About 75%. And the atria are made of muscle. So after the blood from the atria moves into the ventricles by changes in pressure, the atria will actually contract, right? And they contract at the same time. And they will push that additional 20-25% of the blood into the ventricle. the process of the atria contracting and pushing that additional 25% of the blood into both ventricles is called atrial kick. Atrial kick allows more blood to get pushed into the ventricles so that both ventricles can pump more blood. You're following this? Can you live without your atria contracting? Yeah. You can live on 75% of your blood flow. You're not going to pole vault, right? But you can do okay. So there's a condition called atrial fibrillation, where the atria don't contract, they quiver. But can grandpa and grandma do okay when they have atrial fibrillation? Yeah. They're not going to, leap tall buildings, but you can still get by on about 75% of your blood flow. Say yes. You've heard of this. Can you live if your ventricles don't contract? I spelled that wrong. Right. If you have a condition called ventricular fibrillation, then you are clinically dead. Your heart is not pumping any blood. So that is, of course, bad for you. So what do you do when someone has a heart attack and they go into ventricular fibrillation? You defibrillate them. Put the little pads on. Clear. Push the button. People love pushing that button. They look at it, it's all flying. Yeah. Say yeah. But if you happen to defibrillate someone who doesn't need defibrillating, they will now need defibrillating. That's how getting struck by lightning or like touching a high-powered electrical wire kills you. It kills you because it throws your heart into ventricular fibrillation. That's how it kills you. Yeah. Have you ever seen anyone get defibrillated? It is very guttural. It is nasty.
Oh, I did see that.
Did I ever tell you the story about she was 86 years old. She had heart surgery. Did I tell you the story? Do you want to hear it or no?
Yeah.
Anyway, she was this little tiny lady. She had bypass surgery and she had her aortic valve replaced. And she at 86. Well, of course she does not good. So she's in the ICU for about 6 months. And then she started making this little comeback, right? So the doctor said, hey, we'll get her up in a chair. So I said to the aide, I said, look, just watch her lines. I'll pick her up and I'll put her in the chair. So as I'm picking her up and putting her in a chair, of course, she's got a trach, right? So she's on tube feeding. And you know what that does, don't you? So she crapped all over me. And then she was with it. She's like, oh, I'm sorry, mouthing the words. And I'm like, look, it happens. And she's like, what happens? And I go, shit happens.
I couldn't have listened.
Now watch. Anyways, she started going downhill, and nurses were taking bets on how long it would take her toes to fall off. Yeah, that's no joke, because she was on these drugs that cause vasoconstriction, and the body does stuff that makes sense, right? So it is going to preserve blood flow to the brain and vital organs and take blood away from the non-essential parts of the body. So I'm taking care of her one night, and I call the family. I'm like, said, look, it don't look good. You better get up here. That lady was in that unit for at least 6 months, and she never had one family member come up and see her in that entire time. I'll never forget that. Anyways, I had to defibrillate that lady over 20 times because they said, do whatever you can. Do whatever you can. And I had defibrillated her so much that the defibrillator pads were burning her flesh. You could smell the burning flesh. So the family comes in, and her son comes in, who was just a complete tool. And I had a defibrillator. And he looked at me, he goes, you wanted me to see that, didn't you? I said, do you want me to continue with this? Do you want me to continue with this? Can you believe that? Then you wonder why I hate people. What's that? No, I said, I'm not going to do it. I'm not going to do it. She had second-degree burns where I was defibrillating her. You should join my club, Hating People. It's the Haters Club. Are you already there? How old are you? Oh, okay. Yeah, that's about how long it takes.
No, I'm there.
Okay.
I think working in healthcare does that too. Yeah, doing that, working in healthcare does that too, I think. Because I never, ever hated people until I was seen it. Love my residents, I hate their families.
It's just a mess. I told my son, if you put me in a nursing home, when I die, I'm going to come back and haunt you.
You know, it's really cheaper just to hire a nurse to stay at home. I've had patients who will just hire a nurse, pay them like $1,500 a week. Stay at home, they do all their meds, all their bathing, and it's still cheaper than nursing.
You know it's not a bad gig to get into? Group homes. If you can get a group home open, they're getting like $5,000 a month.
CDRF is privately owned and they charge $3,500 for maintenance floors.
There you have it. All right? So let's do that. We'll start a business. When you guys graduate, right, you can be the nurses at that group home. So that means I'll be the only nurse working there. God bless me. See, I'm sick, and I can still just every once in a while. Okay? You guys, are you with me here? All right. How does 25% of the blood from the atria get into the ventricles? Through atrial kick. The vast majority of it is by changes in pressure. Say yes. So that's going to force open the tricuspid valve and the mitral valve. Say yeah. Now you have deoxygenated blood in the right ventricle, and you have oxygenated blood in the left ventricle. Which ventricle contracts first, Toya? They contract at the same time. So the right ventricle is going to contract, and it is going to send that deoxygenated blood through the pulmonic valve or pulmonary valve. And then this big vessel that comes off the right ventricle is called the... Come on. Come on. Come on. No, this big vessel right here, what's the name of it? The pulmonary what? Oh, that's close. It's called the pulmonary trunk. And then the pulmonary trunk branches into the left and right pulmonary arteries. So this is one case where, right, an artery is carrying deoxygenated blood, because by definition an artery takes blood away from the heart. And what happens to the vessels as you get deeper and deeper into the lungs? They get smaller. And what's the smallest vessel in your lungs? Come on. It's a pulmonary capillary. And the pulmonary capillary is one cell membrane thick, and every pulmonary capillary is associated with an alveoli, and that's where gas exchange occurs. Are you with me? At the exact same time that the right ventricle is sending deoxygenated blood to the lungs, the left ventricle is sending oxygenated blood to the cells of the body. So when the left ventricle contracts, it's going to force open the aortic valve. Yeah? That is going to send that oxygenated blood down to the cells of the body. Are you with me? And, of course, we know this. do that. Watch. Come on. Now it does it. Hang on.
In your chest.
So watch, that left ventricle is going to contract and send that oxygenated blood down to the cells of the body. And again, you have the arterial end and you have the venous end. Yes? The arterial end is rich in oxygen, so the oxygen will go into the cell by diffusion. The CO2 from the cell will go into the blood, and that arterial blood becomes venous blood. And remember, recall from our study of the cardiovascular system that there's no pressure in the veins. So through contraction and relaxation of skeletal muscle, that venous blood will return to the right atrium through the inferior and superior vena cava. Say yeah. Guys? So, watch. So how I like to describe it is preload is before you met your man. Then you met him, and he became a load. Then you got rid of him, and he became an afterload. Preload. Better write this down, better not pout. You know what the weird thing about it is? I don't think I'll make it 6 years. That's why I need to retire. I gotta win the lottery. That's preload. Preload, venous return to the heart. There's an even simpler way of describing it, and that is the stretch of the heart. I'm going to show you this. Yeah? What are the two contractile proteins that make up muscle? Come on. What is it? And how'd you get, did you look that up? You knew that? Right, it came right at the end, huh? Watch. Watch. So, here's myosin, here's actin. You got me? Actin, myosin. You follow? The only place that determines the force of contraction of the heart is where they overlap. You got me? You following this? So, if you add more blood back to a normal heart, you will stretch it. And when you stretch it, you align the actin and myosin better, so it contracts harder. Yeah?
So is preload part of Starling's law?
Preload is always part of Starling's law. How many people followed that? Yes or no? So, Watch. This is huge. I'm just gonna write it out for you. Ready? If you increase venous return of blood to the right side of the heart, you with me, guys? Maybe eraser. Who's using red? There it is. If you increase venous return of blood to the right side of the heart, you will stretch the heart. You will actually stretch the walls of the heart. You got me? And when you do that, you align the actin and myosin that makes up that muscle better. You got me? And if the actin and myosin were lined up better, yeah? If you line up those actin and myosin better by stretching them, you will increase the force of contraction and that will increase your systolic blood pressure produced by the right heart. The other thing it will do is if you contract the heart harder and there's more blood in it because you stretched it, that will increase the amount of blood pumped per beat. Are you with me? How many people are following this? Guys? So watch. If you add more blood to the right heart, because you increase venous return, you stretch the heart. The actin and myosin line up better, so the force of contraction of the heart contracts harder. The right side of the heart contracts harder. So the pressure in the right side of the heart goes up, and the amount of blood that's ejected to the lungs goes up. Say yes. What determines the amount of blood pumped by the left heart? The amount of blood pumped by the right heart. So if you add more blood back to the right heart, you're going to stretch it. The heart's going to contract harder, and more blood is going to be sent to the lungs under a higher pressure. Are you with me, guys? This is so good, man. This right here, it's so good. So if you sent more blood to the lungs, you are going to deliver more oxygenated blood to the left side of the heart. And if you send more oxygenated blood to the left side of the heart, what are you going to do to the left side of the heart? Stretch it. So what's going to happen to the force of contraction of the left ventricle and the amount of blood that's pumped per beat and the pressure with which that blood is ejected from that left ventricle? It goes up. How many people got that? Why is that important? Just wasted 22 minutes of your life. Do you know why it's important? Do you, Rebecca? Well, I'm surely not going to tell you. You're going to have to figure that one out on your own. Can I show you why it's important? Okay, why? If you're bleeding your own blood, what's going to happen to your blood volume? What's going to happen to venous return to the right side of the heart? It's going to go down. So what's going to happen is the heart is not going to be as stretched as much. It's going to be stretched even less because you're adding less blood back to it because you're bleeding. So what's going to happen to the force of contraction of the right ventricle and the amount of blood and the pressure with which that blood is sent to the lungs? That's beautiful. And we just learned that the amount of blood pumped out of right heart is equal to the amount of blood pumped out of left. Ain't that right? Ain't that correct? Yep. So if you send less blood to the left side of the heart, the left side of the heart will be stretched even less. So what will happen to the force of contraction, the amount of blood ejected with each beat, and the pressure with which that blood is ejected? And if your blood pressure goes down and you can't maintain blood flow to the brain, you go down. Ain't that right? So when people are bleeding, what do they tell you to do? Where do you store extravenous blood? Do you have any idea how good that information is? Do you, Rebecca? It's fantastic. It really is. It is. That's beautiful. So watch. Can I show you something real quick? Can I? And then you can ambulate home. Ready? What's blood mostly made out of? Made out of water. Right? So watch. If a doctor, Dr. MD, said, you have high blood pressure, so I'm going to give you a medication that causes you to pee more than you should. You got me? What's going to happen to your blood volume as a result of taking this medicine? What's going to happen to venous return to the right side of the heart? Just say down and you got it. What's going to happen to the stretch of the right side of the heart? It's going to go down. So the arrow's down. What's going to happen if it's less stretched to the force of contraction and therefore the pressure that the right heart can generate? It's going to go down. So if you send less blood to the lungs, there will be less blood in the left side of the heart. And the left side of the heart won't be stretched as much. So the force of contraction will be lower, and the amount of blood ejected with each beat and the pressure with which that blood is ejected will go down. Is there a medication that does that? What is that? What's that? Yeah, those are called diuretics. So diuretics take advantage of Starling's law of the heart. Okay. I'll see you guys on Thursday. I will not be able to come in early. I apologize. Probably the earliest I'll be able to get in is about 11 o'clock. Right? So is that okay? What's that? It doesn't really matter anyways, right?
No, she asked if I came in early. I said I can't even be on time for class anyway.
Yeah, I know. It's amazing how people, when the test day, they can actually get in early. That cracks me up. Okay. I can't hear you.
I had a patient who passed on Saturday. His wife's been like kicking him for 40 years. The next day, he died at like 8 o'clock. She slept next to his body. That morning, they took her to the ER and she had a seizure.
Really?